Here is a worst-case scenario, an unhappy scenario, and there is a best-case scenario, a happy scenario. The worst-case scenario is that countries will compete with each other to cure each country selfishly of COVID. Many countries are trying to develop vaccines: China, Britain, the United States, Russia. A selfish outcome would be if the first country to develop a vaccine kept the vaccine to itself and did not share it with the rest of the world. In that case, COVID would stimulate competition around the world, and we would not solve this global problem. My best case scenario, world's people to collaborate with each other. My hope is that the world's people will realize that we cannot we cannot solve COVID until the whole world is safe against COVID. And so my hope is that the world will collaborate to solve the problem of COVID. For the first time, the world will collaborate to solve the global problem. But if the world collaborates to solve the problem of COVID, maybe we will learn a lesson, maybe we will generalize, and then we will go on to collaborate to solve the problem of climate change. That problem we are not collaborating to solve the problem of climate change. But my best hope for COVID is that COVID will teach the world the importance of collaboration to solve global threats. And so, having solved the global threat of COVID, maybe that will inspire us to solve the global threat of climate change and of unsustainable resource use and inequality. In that way, my best case scenario is that COVID, which is a tragedy and killing millions of people around the world, this tragedy may contain what we call a silver lining. Maybe there may be good things that will come out of COVID. Maybe COVID will motivate the world to create, for the first time, a sustainable economy. And so that's my best case scenario. Perhaps this tragedy will bring us hope and will bring us the sustainable world that we hope for. Thank you for inviting me to be with you in Korea, at least virtually, and I hope in the future when COVID is past that I can be with you again in person. Thank you.
크게 위기의 세 가지를 기후변화, 그리고 지속가능하지 않은 자원의 고갈, 그 다음에 이제 불평등, 이 세 가지를 커다란 위기라고 생각하시면서 이게 사실 커다란 위기인데 그 위기의 심각성을 우리가 인지를 못하고 중요시하지 않게 생각한다고 이제 말씀하시면서 이제 비유를 코로나 같은 경우는 바로 우리 눈앞에서 펼쳐지기 때문에 굉장히 사람들이 대비를 하고 이걸 문제를 해결하기 위해서 애를 쓰는데 기후변화 같은 경우는 너무 천천히 진행되는 나쁜 시나리오일 때도 자각하지 못하는 사이에 점점 위기가 다가온다. 이런 문제 말씀하시면서 국제적인 연대라든지 문제 해결의 필요성을 말씀해 주셨습니다. 역시 그 생략으로 출발하신 백그라운드라서 그런지 인문과 과학을 그리고 사회적인 어떤 문제를 넘나드는 통찰력을 보여주셔서 아주 감사한 대답이었습니다. 그다음 두 번째로 소개해드릴 분은 헬레나 호지 여사이십니다. 아마도 여러분들이 리틀 티베트라고 애칭을 가지고 있죠. 인도의 북부지방 라다크 지방을 연구한 책인데 혹시 오래된 미래라는 책을 들어보셨는지 모르겠습니다. 이 호지 여사가 사실 그 책으로 굉장히 유명했는데요. 오래된 미래에서 아주 전통적인 공동체인 라다크 지방이 어떤 세계화의 목표에서 어떻게 파괴되어 가는지를 아주 설득력 있게 쓰신 책입니다. 그리고 최근에는 굉장히 생태 환경운동에 몰입을 하고 계시면서 더불어 지역화, 로컬라이제이션에 대해서 굉장히 많은 생각과 아이디어를 가지고 계신 분입니다. 2년 전에는 로컬의 미래, 원제는 로컬이즈 아워 퓨처라는 책을 쓰셔가지고 또 많은 또 지역에 대한 통찰력을 제공하고 계신데요. 이분에 대해서 저희가 그래서 지방은 축소되어 가는데 진정한 지속가능한 삶과 행복을 위해 지역화를 호지화석에서 강조하고 계신데 이것이 시대와 그 내도시 집중 사업에서 어떻게 가능할 것인지를 여쭤봤고요. 또한 더불어서 코로나 시대에 지금 저희가 접해 있는데 포스트 코로나 시대에 있어서 지역화, 로컬라이제이션은 어떤 의미를 가지는지, 그리고 역시 자연과의 정원원상, 하모니 네이처, 그런 삶은 어떻게 구현이 될 수 있을 것인지에 대해서 여쭤봤고요. 여기에 대해서 종합적인 답변을 주셨습니다. 네. 영상을 보시겠습니다.
Alright. Well, so first of all, I'm very grateful to people for the earth for doing this important work and for inviting me to speak. I think we have an opportunity now, after COVID-19, to support a major shift in direction, a shift away from supporting global businesses and the global market, one global market, and instead support many more local, regional, national markets. And it's an opportunity that we really must take. We don't have much time, because by supporting one global market for a very long time, actually for hundreds of years, what's happened is that the giant businesses that operate globally, they're not able to truly respect the biological diversity, the living natural world, which is the real economy. They're also not able to respect the individuality of each and every human being who is unique, but also not the cultural diversity that is vital. The cultural diversity we have arose out of people living in the real economy, in the natural world. That's how it is that we have different foods, different racial characteristics, different languages. All of that diversity came out of living in greater harmony with the living earth. So localizing, as we define it in my organization, Local Futures, is about rapidly waking up to the fact that we have a type of blind leadership where almost everyone within the national governments around the world, from Sweden to South Korea to the United States to Brazil, our leaders are adhering to, they're following an outdated economic idea of comparative advantage. The idea is that we must not produce a lot of things to be more self-reliant. Instead, you should specialize for export. Now, this process has led to a massive urbanizing process, where most people have been moved into bigger and bigger cities and sprawling megalopolis areas, and everywhere in the world, villages, smaller towns and cities are dying. Now, it is not something that really, even a percentage of the entire human population would actually want. But we have to see the big picture to understand why this is happening. And that big picture is that we need to look at economic policies that keep building up the global infrastructure instead of supporting local infrastructure. Now, I think we have an opportunity which is being very clearly demonstrated, because with COVID-19, all around the world, it was very clear that being in the big city was not the best place to be. All around the world, people, when they could, shifted to smaller towns and villages. All around the world, people became interested in growing food, healthy local food. And so, local food economies, not as an absolute, It's not saying, oh, right now everybody's going to eat local. Not possible. In many parts of the world, you would be eating cotton or petroleum or sugar or something. We need to be looking at a strategic, systemic path towards moving towards localizing, which means shortening the distance between production and consumption. Focusing on food as the most important vehicle has far more implications than people realize, because it is dealing with the only thing that every human being needs every day. But more importantly than that, when we shorten the distances in food production, we encourage diversity on the land, diversification. Now this is absolutely key. If we use the language of regenerative agriculture, we may forget to stress that diversification is absolutely essential. We also need to understand that if we support more local food systems, we can support meaningful livelihoods for many more people on the land. Now, many people say, well, people don't want to farm and they're not interested, but actually what we're seeing is that there are many young people who actually want to farm and who are keen to do so, but it's difficult in the dominant system. So we need to be supporting this trend. We need to be spelling out that in virtually every country, the COVID-19 epidemic led to all around the world people starting to grow food, becoming interested in saving their own local seeds and producing food, and that many people are reporting how happy it made them. So the localizing of the economy is about also the economics of happiness. It's a way of moving away from very heavy, large-scale industrialization to more human scale. Human scale is fundamental, and with that, we should be looking at technologies that will be adapted to human needs. We must be very careful of just moving into mega-technological structures that are going to push us into depending on robots instead of people. It's a really important discussion, looking at localization as a strategic way to create more human scale, happier economies with more meaningful livelihoods that support greater diversity. As it happens, the 3 F's of forestry, fishing, and farming, there is no efficiency at scale. There is the opposite, the sense that the smaller the better. The smaller the better when it comes to planting forest, and fishery, and farming. We urgently need to get this message out. We need what I call big picture activism, and we need to do it without demonizing or blaming either left politics, right politics, corporations, individual presidents. It's really about the structures. And people, many good people, have blindly supported an urbanizing path that is destroying the fabric of nature. We can make this shift. We can make use of renewable energy, but we need to be careful that we don't try to plaster the soil with solar panels in order to support the global market where countries are importing and exporting the same product. No, we need to look at smaller scale, shorter distances, and that's also about slowing down. So slower, smaller, more human is also more ecological, and it is happier and healthier. Then I'll say that thank you all so much for listening. I've been spelling out some very broad ideas that sound very general, but I believe that that's what we need today. We are not looking enough at the global situation, and that's why most people really are not aware what's happening. So I hope when you go away now, you will also be thinking about these issues, that you will be studying this more. I hope you'll come to our website, localfutures.org. We have a lot of books and materials, a lot of examples that you can gain more insight into these issues. We need to spread the word and get more people to support the localization movement. Thank you so much.
역시 오래전부터 이 모든 주제에 대해서 찬착해 오신 분의 지식의 내공이 느껴집니다. 그 인간의 규모에 맞는 그 로컬라이제이션, 그 지역화가 충분히 가능하고 또 경쟁력이 있다는 그런 용기를 북돋아주는 말씀이신데요. 특별히 그 컨퍼런스가 강원도에서 열리고 있는데 이 강원도라는 지역에 맞게끔 저희가 충분히 그 경쟁력을 가질 수 있는 분야가 있을 것 같은 그런 확신이 듭니다. 굉장히 따뜻하고 진정어린 말씀 감사하게 잘 들었습니다. 그다음 세 번째 그 소개하실 연사는요, 그 미하엘 라이터리 대사님입니다. 현재 그 우리 한국의 주한 EU 대표 의대사이신데요. 원래 참석하시기로 되어 있지만 코로나 사태 때문에 대사관에서 못 나오시고 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 줌으로 참여하고 있는데요. 지금 화면에 저희가 보고 있습니다. 이 라이터리 대사님께서는 인스브루크 대학에서 법학 박사학위를 받으셨고요. 그 이후에 국제정치, 국제관계 쪽에 계속 공부를 해오시면서 유럽에서 여러 가지 국제적인 어떤 WTO라든지 OECD라든지 그런 이제 외교 활동을 해오시면서 주로 이제 유럽연합 EU를 대표해서 또 여러 가지 외교적인 활동도 해오셨습니다. 현재 저희 한국에서 그 대사님으로 계시는데요. Welcome to our conference. 네, 대사님 그러면 저희가 대사님의 그 줌으로 참여하는 의견을 들어보기로 하겠습니다. 네.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry that I cannot come in person because we were asked to stay in Seoul and not to travel. I know the area of Haiwon from skiing, and I would have looked forward to discover the woods and tomorrow and to discuss with you in person. But not traveling might reduce the CO2 imprint, so that might be something positive. As the title of this session is Harmony with Nature, I was thinking I will concentrate on biodiversity and the Green Deal, because this is, in my opinion, very closely linked. Because we should also see that the COVID-19 pandemic highlights the importance and urgency of the need to protect and to restore nature. The pandemic also underlined the increased risk of emergence and spread of infectious diseases as nature is destroyed, and therefore also the living space for animals is reduced. We are permanently reducing the space between us and animals. Protecting and restoring biodiversity and ecosystem is the key to our resilience and prevent the emergence and spread of diseases in the future. Biodiversity is essential for life. Nature is the source of food, medicines, and it is also important for our mental and physical well-being. However, humanity is faced with biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, which is one of the greatest threats for the next decade. Protecting biodiversity is also crucial for the economy and business. I always underline this because it is not only in the interest of our well-being, but also in the interest of the economy to invest in, to preserve nature and to fight climate change. Well, if you look at a few figures, then you see that half of global GDP depends on nature. And 3 industrial sectors, construction, agriculture, food and drink in particular, are highly depending on nature. Biodiversity conservation would generate 49 billion euros, that's a little bit more, it's $55 billion, in annual profits for the seafood industry through conserving of marine stocks, and would save another 50 billion annually for the insurance industry by reducing flood damage losses due to the protection of coastal wetlands. Talking about wetlands, I recently visited the Suncheon wetlands in Korea, and I was impressed by the efforts which are made to conserve them and the cooperation and collaboration of the local farmers, because the wetlands cannot survive if the surrounding environment is not cooperative. Therefore, and the wetlands in Suncheon gave me also this confirmation, this is self-creating, like the whole investment in various industries, tourism, you go and see the wetlands, but also farming and conservation activities, and the wetlands also are essential for the survival of many birds. Therefore, economic and social costs of inactions are extremely high, and they are expected to increase because the damage will increase and will accelerate. The world lost an estimated 3.5 to 18.5 trillion euros a year in ecosystem services from 1997 to 2011 due to land overcharge, and an estimated 5.5 to 10.5 trillion per year from land degradation. These are enormous costs which are created just by not doing anything. Biodiversity and climate change are also intrinsically linked. The loss and unsustainable use of nature are the main drivers of climate change, while climate change in turn accelerates nature's destruction by droughts, heat waves, flooding, and wildfires. As the crises are linked, the climate change mitigation and biodiversity preservation have to go hand in hand. Therefore, biodiversity is a priority of the European Union's external action and integral part of efforts to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It was only in May of this year that the European Commission announced the adoption of 2 policy packages that are central to the European Green Deal, namely the EU Biodiversity Strategy of 2030 and Farm to Fork Strategy to support the long-term sustainability of both nature and farming. I will just elaborate a little bit on these 2 elements because there is a lot of talk about similarity between the European Green Deal and the Korean Green Deal. But as far as I understand the Korean Green Deal, so far it is still being developed, biodiversity and what we call farm to fork strategy are not yet part of the Korean approach, and I would therefore like to underline the ideas which are behind it. The biodiversity strategy sets legally binding nature restoration targets in 2021, providing stricter protection of the forest in the European Union and establishes areas for at least 30% of both land and sea in Europe. It also aims to restore degraded ecosystems at land and sea across Europe by boosting organic farming and biodiversity-rich landscape features on agricultural land, thereby halting and reversing the decline of the important pollinators, reducing the use of harmful pesticides by about 50% by 2030, and restoring at least 25,000 kilometers of EU rivers to a free-flowing state, as well as planting 3 billion trees by 2030. To this end, Birds and Habitats Directives, that's how we call our laws, is another cornerstone of the EU biodiversity protection. The Farm to Fork strategy comprehensively addresses the challenges of sustainable food systems and seeks to reverse the decline of the health of agroecosystems that are vital for agricultural production and food security. According to this strategy, the Commission will take action to reduce 50% the overall use of chemical pesticides by 2030 and reduce by 50% the use of more hazardous pesticides also by 2030. This would be supported by the full implementation of the EU Pollinators Initiative, which is essential to keep our nature blooming. In addition, the strategy seeks to bring back at least 10% of agricultural area under high diversity landscape features and at least 25% of the EU's agricultural land to be organically farmed by 2030. So these plans are the plans for the European Union, but they are also part of our Green Deal diplomacy. So we are advocating these ideas to our partners, and in that respect, Korea is a very important partner because of the concentration in Korea. Farmland is concentrated, people are concentrated, and as we see in times of pandemics, concentration heightens the risk of contagion. And the same applies to agricultural land. The same applies to nature. Therefore, we advocate and we invite Korea to join us in this comprehensive approach, and also to make sure that the main ideas for biodiversity, for preserving the nature, are factored in all the other policies. It is not possible just to have one policy, the policy preserve the nature. You have to have it in mind when you are constructing roads, when you're constructing airfields, when you're thinking about new modes of transport. All that needs a factoring in. So therefore, I'm always happy if I have a chance to talk with my Korean friends about the similarities and the ideas between the European Green Deal and the Korean Green Deal. So nature and harmony with nature is certainly part of our concept, and I do hope it will also be part of the concept of Korea. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다. Please stay on this session. 네. 지금까지 그 세 분